Bienvenidos to
Merendiando
from Radio Luna Theater. And this week we're taking a look at the year we just had.
A year full of eating at the Panera, at the Panda Express, full panorama, pandemonium.
Or whatever you want to call this pandemic.
Happy 1 year of physical distancing, everybody in Toronto. When was the last time you were touched by another human being?
We have been physically distancing for a whole year. And for artists like us around the city, that has meant that we haven't been able to do theater the way we used to or performance the way we used to. So we invited some of our favorite artists in the city to share with us how this year has been for them. And we will introduce them a little bit later in this episode. Camila.
Okay.
What do you wish you knew 12 months ago?
Like, this is such a rude question, and we wrote it. Like, you know, if you've been listening for the past year, the podcast has been doing lots. We've really amped up all of our activity, and that's because we can, right? But basically, this time last year, we also did an episode where right after, the borders closed and stuff, and Monica and I were just like, trying to understand what was going on. And if you have been listening since then, you know that I had to come. Basically, when the borders closed, I was in Mexico. I was in Oaxaca, en la playa, durmiéndome en una hamaca. Okay, bro? Like, ideal life. Comiéndome pescadito fresquito a la plancha. I'm not bitter at all. And then I had to come back like really, really fast because I didn't even know what was happening. I didn't have internet. And then I had internet for a minute, and I saw these urgent calls and texts from my family being like, hello, the border's closed. Where the heck are you? So listen, if I knew what was going to happen 12 months ago, I would have never left Mexico. I would have.
You would have stayed.
Oh, I totally would have stayed. I would have brought my laptop to Mexico. I didn't bring my laptop. So I would have brought that, and then I would have been set. Yeah, I definitely would have stayed. I would have stayed with my cousin probably, and I would have worked remotely because that's what we've been doing here anyway, right? Like, and I might as well do it where there's delicious fruit and my family. What about you, Monica? What do you wish you knew 12 months ago?
I'm gonna say not 12 months ago. A little bit more than 12 months ago, when I was in Mexico, also with my family, I would have loved a heads up that I wasn't able to see them for a while, in person. And maybe I would have had fought less, hug more. But fought, in a sitcom, funny family way. But yeah, or eaten as much as I could tamales and tacos and carnes asadas.
Oh my God, I would have. Man.
Also, I wish I knew I wouldn't get a haircut for 12 months.
What would you have done differently?
I would just cut it super short, like what we were saying, like maybe un honguito. How do you say that?
A mushroom cut.
A mushroom cut, or maybe something super short so it would last me for a bit.
All right. And I also guess I want to say, like, a year into this, we're making jokes about this because, that's what you do when you're traumatized. But also, this better than I do, comedian. Sorry, just real talk. But there's been a huge human toll to this all too. Like, it's hard to talk about. There's just so many layers, and there's a lot of grief too.
Something that it has allowed us, this Pandy, this Panera, to do is to connect with artists and community members and activists outside Toronto, which that has been a little gift that we have had. So we talked to people in Australia, Vancouver, Mexico, United States,
Finland, New Orleans.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the little gifts that we have seen. And also during this podcast too, we also learned of all the other stuff we have in our archives, and that's how the conversatorio started to know. There was like, oh, look at all these conversations we had when we could gather.
It's so cool to hear those conversations because everyone's just sitting together in a room thinking together. It's so rad.
Yeah,
breathing
breathing
on
in
each
the
other,
same space.
drinking water.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also so smart. Like they gathered like experts to talk about really important things. So I'm really excited about the conversatorios that are going to be this year too, because it's like this Panera has kind of made you look at what you've done. I mean, I'm going to talk for myself. Make me look at what I've done. It's made me look at the life I've created for myself and the things I've done and the things I've learned and like kind of reflect a lot. So these conversatorios are kind of, I think, Aluna Teatro's way of reflecting on what they've done and the conversations they've had, because just like, you know, premieres of new Canadian works only get one production and then they're lost in the ether forever because no one wants to do a second production, which is stupid. We shouldn't just like have these conversations once and never think about them again. Like there's so much gold there.
But also knowing where those conversations will take place now, it's really interesting to see as well. Then Aluna Theater created the studio series.
Ambitious.
Yeah, which has been a great, I was going to say experiment, but like, well, yeah, a great
It is.
process.
Yeah.
So we have seen artists create and record remotely now. And it's like, whoa, how interesting and how many roles to do stuff remotely.
Oof.
But also, it's just amazing to see where it's like where there's a wheel, there's a way. I feel that's the studio series like theme. But yeah, it's been really nice, and we are so excited for the season to share with you more of that.
Yeah, because like audio, you know, listening to people talk like right now, like Monica and I, it's great. But like we are storytellers, you know, and experimenting with how to tell you a story with all of our theatrical knowledge, but just through your ears is a really fun challenge. And I think people are really making some incredible things this year with the studio series. Yeah. And last year, because Monica shared the Cunnilinguist, which is a show in process. And like, if you haven't listened to it yet, like, oh my God, it's just so good. Like, just you laugh and you cry, and it's only through your ears.
So we asked some of our artist friends about how they adapted during this pandemic to doing their art practices. And I can say personally, something that I have really adapted is my improv practice to move it online. And it's been a really interesting process. I've been doing it mostly with Bad Dog Theater. They have adapted to this. Like, if you can, and we'll put it in the show notes, check out Bad Dog Theater and Bad Dog TV, and they have their programming there almost every night of the week, and I've been able to play those shows, and it's really interesting. Some of our guests will mention not having an audience, not having people dancing to your beats, not having
like live reaction.
Yeah. It's a journey, as well as hosting events. I've been hosting a bunch of events during this Pandy, and I also now know more about green screens, lighting, editing, and sound. So you can rent me as a whole production company.
You seriously can, though.
Yeah. So how about you, Camila? How do you adapt it with your art practice?
You know, oh man, it's hard. It's hard. You know, it's hard to talk about because, you know, I am lucky enough. The gods blessed me with this wild thing where like I got the biggest grant I've ever gotten in my life to work full time for Aluna for a year, right as the pandemic started. So I am one of the very few people who's lucky enough, who I don't even know the word for it, who like happened to be privileged enough really to have a full-time salary in the arts for a year during this year. And that's something that I have to like speak really openly about because it's just weird. It's just weird because if you look at the statistics for actual like employment for people, the data that Canada has is, you know, super gendered and they don't have a lot of data on racialized people. But basically, at least 100,000 women have left the workforce and are not returning since the beginning of the pandemic. And that number is 10 times less for men. So it's like men are kind of like staying-ish the same in the amount of employment in certain areas and even gaining more. And women are just not. Women are, you know, moms, you know, childcare, schools, all of that has affected like gender equality.
Mm-hmm.
Like this whole thing has happened. So that really does play a toll on my art because I want my art to respond to the reality of people around me. And again, I'm saying the data that is available that I've been able to see is super gendered. It's men and women, and it's not. It doesn't take into account race. And I know that in the U.S., almost 90, I think more than 95% of the jobs that women lost over the pandemic were Black, Asian, and Latinx people.
Mm.
And we don't even have that data here in Canada that I've been able to find. So it's like the impact that it's had on people is we have yet to even see the results. But I do not want to be part of a world that doesn't have everyone participating in the way that they want to. So the way that it's made me think really seriously about my privilege, being in this position, being funded by the Metcalf Foundation right now. And that money ends in June, and I don't know what's happening after that. I have no idea. I have no idea. And lucky enough, in Canada, we had CERB for a while, the recovery benefit, which is really amazing. But now we don't, and I don't really know what to do, man. Like, so I don't know. That's kind of how I want to respond to that question. Because I had full-time employment, I didn't have to do a bunch of gigs. I'm a musician. I used to like play with bands all the time. I used to, do the thing of the artist where you patch your life together with contracts and gigs and you just patch together. And this year I didn't do that, which is very interesting for me. So one of the major things I learned was that there is so much power in focus. There's so much power in if you do give yourself like one task, and then you just do that one thing and you give yourself the space, the things that can come out of that, oh my gosh, it's beyond what you even think. It's like really cool. So I don't know. And also in a nutshell, I've been really sad. I'm just starting to get back into music because I was practicing and I am practicing, but I'm too sad to share it. I don't know. I'm sad. It makes me sad. It was illegal to sing outside for most of the year. True. And it still is. So I don't even know what to do, man. So that's it. I don't know. Let's hear from some of our guests. Why don't we start with two of our amazing local artists that we're going to feature today. Both of these artists have adapted their work from being live in front of the people to the digital realm. So first off, we've got Sofia Fly, who is a local DJ, producer, poet, and Salvi babe. And we've got Yolanda Bonnell, a queer, two-spirit, Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and South Asian multidisciplinary performer, writer, facilitator. We've had Yolanda on the podcast before. Actually, she was one of the first people that we had remotely at the beginning of last year during the pandemic. So you can go check out that episode. But this past year, Sofia Fly managed to release a full album called Virgo Rising, and it's freaking incredible if you haven't heard it. And Yolanda adapted her theater development process to be completely online whilst trying to still be a theater artist this past year. So let's take a little listen to Sofia and Yolanda.
The panorama. So I released a full-length album that was like 80% instrumental this year. It was interesting going through this whole process while not being able to do shows because like you don't get to like read audience reaction. I DJ a lot of parties, so like me brainstorming what kind of sounds I'm going for and like targeting like certain themes and ideas, I'm very much like remembering the parties I'm going to and like seeing the energy of the community around me, and not being able to do that as much is definitely like a bit of a mind bluff. And I still found a way. It is kind of, you have to kind of put your mind in a little bit of a different place creatively and just kind of get lost in your own sauce instead of, reading, instead of the sauce that's around you, I guess. It was very interesting. And of course, there's no release party that you can do. It is a little bit anticlimactic. You spend all this time working on this thing, you put it out, people love it. but there's no like real world, celebration of that. You don't get to see its like impact in a room, right? People are online listening and sharing. So that's cool. So you still get a little bit of, dopamine from that, but it's just like a little small dose. It's not quite the same. Still rewarding in its own right. The gigs I'm doing now have also kind of taken on that a little bit too. I realize that throughout this panorama, I'm still finding a lot of opportunities for networking, for building my resume, doing shows, meeting new people, creating art, having audiences. But it's all digital and like it's something again, but it's not as like dopamine inducing as, real life validation. Online validation's cool, but I don't know, likes can only get you so far. It's I don't know if the human mind is wired that way.
Annie, it's Yolanda. I had a lot of workshops booked that were meant to be in person for both My Sister's Rage and White Girls in Moccasins. And mostly we just had to move them online. Rage was supposed to have a 2 week in person workshop that I was really excited about, bringing some out of town artists in. I secured all of that funding, and then the pandemic hit. So I had to sort of change those plans. And we altered it down to 1 week, moved it all online, and had shorter hours because I knew at that point, I think most of us knew that, being on the screen for so long was going to be damaging. So we needed to make sure people felt comfortable even in their own spaces, and we didn't want to overwork anybody, so we tried to keep it like to short 3 hour 4 hour sessions. And so I was able to get some work done that way. Yeah, but mostly it was just moving things to a virtual sort of setting. Bug was fortunate enough to be able, we shot an archival safely for FemFest, which we were again supposed to be in Winnipeg. Yeah, so it was just a matter of being adaptable and moving work online and listening to what our artists needed and what they required to do that work. It's been very difficult to create in this pen era. I have struggled a lot because of my energy levels. So it takes a lot of energy for me to create, and it takes a lot of energy from me to do facilitation work, which is what I've mostly been doing. I did go away for a week to a cabin type place on Lake Simcoe back in the fall, which was the best idea I had. So I went away for a week to begin to write a new play called The Eighth Fire. And that was really great. I was able to sort of shut out the noise of the city and the routine that we all are finding ourselves in, and be in a different environment and be on land, be able to go and be on the water that my ancestors spent some time on. So that was nice. And yeah, but other than that, it's been really difficult. And I find that I need to leave my environment in order to write right now, or only do one thing at a time, which, I mean, why were we doing more than one thing at a time anyway?
On the notes, you can find Sofia's and Yolanda's social media handles. You can find where you can see Sofia DJing. She has her shows on Twitch, so check it out. They're so good if you just want to dance in your kitchen, your living room, your room.
Yeah. And Yolanda has got her social media handles. You should totally go follow her work. She did publish a play this year. You can also buy that book. We're going to just leave all the links in the show notes.
Next, we're gonna hear from Rhoma Spencer and the Party People Collective. Rhoma Spencer is an actor, play creator, director, and comedian, and is a veteran theater practitioner. And the Party People Collective, consisting of Jordan Camp and Liz Staple, a beautiful, dynamic duo of queer, multidisciplinary artists. They both presented performance work live in front of the audiences in real time outside, like real.
Like the good
Like
old days.
like we saw it, like
We
we were
did. We
there.
went with our bodies.
And they both presented their work as part of the Bricks and Glitter Festival. Rhoma's show Queer and Teen was literally out on the street downtown with live music and gorgeous physical theater. The party people collected presented a show called The After Party in a little park for one audience member at a time. We asked them more about their creative process, and this is what they said.
My name is Rhoma Spencer. This was the first time I was directing an entire physical theater piece. As a director, as a playwright, I tend to direct, theater that is narrative driven. And I created Quarantine out of pure necessity to stay sane during the pandemic. And the difference with this particular piece, as I said, is having to work with two dance theater artists. They were what you call a triple threat. They can sing, they can dance, they can act. But however, what the challenge I brought to them was that I didn't want them dancing, that this piece was basically a movement piece. Yes, it is inspired by dance, but I wanted them to come to it from a place of understanding viewpoints. I was exposed to a number of workshops with the Luna Theatre, actually, when we were doing Solitudes, and I really, really got to love the notion and the idea of viewpoints. And I had in my head that I wanted to direct a piece that is entirely viewpointed. So in a way, of course, it was totally different from anything I've ever done. And my own thoughts about how the pandemic has impacted the arts industry here in Toronto. I mean, in the earlies, people were at a loss as to, where do we turn, what do we do? And as time go by, they had to find ways and means to make themselves relevant, those arts, theatre companies, production houses. And I remember one of the very first ones that come to mind is Convergence Theatre Company, where they did something called the COVID Confessions, where they asked people to, just with a 1 minute soundbite, to phone in or send us a text or a video, their own confessions around COVID. And then they farm out these confessions to artists who would take from these confessions and create any form of art, whether it's a song, whether it's a play, whether it's an animation, a film, a movie, a monologue. So those are one of the ways that, I remember one company that, from very early started to find ways to make a difference. And as time went by, I started to see, all the bigger houses like, Theatre Passe Muraille and Factory Theatre, Obsidian Theatre, Luna Theatre, have been doing their part in trying to stay relevant, so to speak, where they engage artists, whether it's in the form of a residency or they create, a performance that is digital. So, one of the ways they've been making a big difference is looking at performances from, the virtual point of view, because we can't go into the theaters. I know in Trinidad it is a bit slow in the Caribbean because they're still kind of depending on, looking towards the government, to help them. Some artists have been doing their part, but I find that it was more the musicians that were doing more than my theater colleagues. So I don't see any similarities between what is happening in Toronto and what certainly, is existing in Trinidad.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Campbell, also known as Jord Camp.
And I'm Elizabeth Staples.
So the After Party was a show we made last year. And the After Party is basically a one-on-one performance where I'm performing for one audience member in a public park. And we're both listening to iPods that are synchronized with the performance track. So It's kind of like a interactive site-specific music video drag experience with like outfits and reveals and surprises all around the park. And we did it in the Brandon Avenue Parkette in Toronto.
Well, we started it in COVID, so it very much was like reflected, like all of the feelings and restrictions and everything that we were feeling at that moment. And at the beginning of March of 2020, George showed me a draft of a solo piece that we were going to work on, and then COVID hit, and then we still had all that energy, and we really didn't know where to go with it. And so we started working in May, and it really took us on a journey through the summer.
It was a journey. Yeah, it was going to be a Pride thing originally in June. And then when the Black Lives Matter reckoning happened, I got that. I totally took that term from Sedna Fayadi, who's like called it the reckoning, you know, that like flashpoint moment in June. That really kind of put us on a different course. But this is a big part of what it was like making the after party. We really just went with the flow. Like it wasn't time to do it in June anymore. We changed course. We just kept working on it. Eventually we performed it in September, and it was at the time of the Bricks and Glitter Festival. And yeah, it was just this really flexible, malleable project with no end date, with no exact timeline.
And it was the first time that, at least for myself, that we were able to like follow the project and let it take us where it needed to go. And on the days that we didn't need to or didn't want to rehearse for whatever reason,
we didn't have hot, to. We were too tired. We were too sad. It was an intense summer.
We rehearsed it 6 feet apart. I didn't touch Jordan once through the whole thing.
We wore masks.
We were masks the whole time. Yeah. And so because it was like the process and the project was about it, it kind of made it easier to incorporate the restriction or the like hand sanitizing and washing things, because it was about it. It was
totally like the whole form of the show was built around it. The audience was in a chalk circle that was 6 feet in radius, so like we never were too close to the audience, just the one audience member. And as we were talking about earlier, like COVID obviously, you know, had its own challenges. Both of our lives, I think, were turned upside down throughout the process, but it also allowed us to be really flexible and really work at our own pace. We didn't have as much else going on at all. We just worked really slowly on it. So as you said, I think because the COVID stuff was built into it, like that was just there. And then the actual effect of the pandemic allowed us to really, as you said, follow the project and just do it.
And sink into the themes and let it like reflect in our process and also end project.
So you and I both actually saw these shows in person, like we watched them.
Yes, I remember I watched Queer and Teen, and it was so interesting because it was across the street.
With like cars going between you and stuff.
I think that was the first thing I watched live.
Yeah, I actually think so too. And it was in the summer, right? I mean, the one that you saw was in the summer. And then I saw the one as part of Bricks and Glitter because I'm part of the organizing collective that does that festival. And the one that I saw was in front of Regent Park. And there was like live music, and I saw people outside, like for real.
You know, when you go to shows and you're like, I'm probably gonna run into some friends. And I remember seeing some people I know, but being so weird about it.
I remember feeling really free. Like I remember like seeing the crowd and being a little bit scared, but then seeing a bunch of people I knew. And then when we were watching the show, I just felt like so free because I was with people and I miss people. And like, the Queer and Teen was a physical theater show, so there was a lot of expression through the body, and I was like dancing along, and so were a bunch of other people in the audience because we just could, and we had the space too. We were all distanced, so that was really cool. And then the after party.
I got to see it not as an audience member because you needed to sign up because it was literally one person at like they really worked it through the COVID restrictions, so it was one person at a time. So I was just in a little hill in the park with my mask.
Watching from afar.
Yeah, with a blanket because I was cold. It was so magical because seeing that audience member, probably they've been isolated, and then having this like super intimate moment with somebody they don't know, but they were trusting so completely and dancing. It was so beautiful. And also seeing Jordan getting ready just in the bushes in the park.
So queer. I love it.
When I went to see it, behind me, there was like bushes and stuff. So that's where George had other stuff. So they were changing and there. And in the street, this truck stopped and was like, "Watch out!" They were yelling at me like, "Watch out!
Oh
There's
my
a
God.
man behind you.
Oh.
There's a man behind you." And I'm like, "Yes, I know it's okay." But I love it because they were so worried about me. And I'm like, "It's a show."
But that people do not expect theater to be happening in their parks, you know?
Seeing also not only people who were there willingly as audience members, but just people who just
Oh, I
happened.
loved it. I loved it. Yes, Queer and Teen was in front of a Tim Hortons, and people were just coming in and out of the Tim Hortons being like, why are there so many drums out here? Like, what is this sound system? And they're just living their lives. And I love that.
And who knows what maybe the summer will bring.
I hope it brings joy.
I hope it brings joy, and I hope it brings some sort of like theater or performance.
We asked all of our guests about some of the projects that they did this year, but then we also asked them 2 questions. The first one was, what do you wish you knew 12 months ago? Which Monica and I answered at the beginning of the episode. And then we also asked them, if you could give another artist one piece of advice for working during this pandemic, what would it be? And this is what they said.
I wish I knew how to diversify myself as an artist. Clearly, not just 12 months ago, but a couple of years ago, because during the pandemic, I find myself being more creative. It's like if my creative juices have turned up a notch. You know what we'll say, my creativity turn up. Yeah. I find myself doing film. I never saw myself as a filmmaker, but I felt that I could do it. And I did just that. Did a film. It was for a 1-minute film festival. And I did this 1-minute film, submitted it to the festival, and was accepted. And then, of course, the joy of being accepted, being the only Canadian throughout the world. You had a lot of Latin Americans, people from Europe, that was part of the festival, and I was the only one from Canada, and it had one other person from the USA. So that gave me even more encouragement to do further. So I went on to do a 5-minute film and also submit that to festivals and was getting in. So both the 1-minute film festival, the 1-minute film was getting into a couple other festivals, and then I decided to do a 5-minute film as part of my Aluna Theatre residency quite recently.
If I could go back 1 year ago and kind of tell myself something, I guess one, I would obviously tell myself like how long this thing is gonna last, because oh my goodness, in the beginning, the uncertainty just drove me crazy. And then slowly, I started to like understand what the deal was. The second wave didn't take me by surprise. Like I knew our government was incompetent. I knew it was going to come again. um, so yeah, here we are a year later, and I don't know if I would have done anything differently, honestly. It was very much just focus on your craft and stuff. I guess the one thing that I wish I picked up on a little bit sooner was figuring out my live stream setup. That's been a thing that's been kind of hard to figure out. It was like difficult to know what platform was the best. Like, is it Facebook Live, Instagram Live, or Zoom parties? And I'm very focused on Twitch right now because it's a platform that you can really grow on. You can actually monetize pretty easily. It's not like, YouTube or Instagram where you need like so many followers and like, connections to make the smallest amount of money. Twitch seems a lot more achievable, reachable. So I wish I focused on that a little bit sooner so that I could have like had a little bit more momentum after a year of doing it. I've only been doing it a couple months.
Well, I mean, I wish I knew this was going to happen so that I spent more time out in the community. My goal for 2020 was to spend more time out with people because I am I don't even I'm an ambivert. Like I am introverted, but I love being out with people as well. So I do struggle with that, and I really wanted to spend more time out with people, and so I feel like my small regret is not going out as much and allowing my fear or insecurities or anxiety mostly sort of hold me back from going out and sweating all over people. No. So I wish I knew that I could do that more or just do it. I just wish I was doing it more. So did it more because now we can't. So yeah, I guess I wish I just knew that this was going to happen so that I could jam it all in there.
That's so weird. We're at the beginning of March now, and to think back,
I've been thinking about this a lot, like what it would be like, last March when the pandemic hit, knowing that it would last this long, because we really didn't. Like we were even at one point, I think, discussing like if we do this show in September, is it even relevant? Because maybe the pandemic will be over, but like obviously not, far from over. But I guess in a way, sometimes I wish I knew it would go on this long because I would have planned more long term instead of just like month to month. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad that I didn't because I was just really in the moment. I don't know.
For sure. And I think that, just in relation to that, I would have liked to tell myself that I am in control of a lot more than I think I am. That time is irrelevant, and the things that I thought that I was using to like propel me forward in terms of my job, in terms of my community, in terms of my like external connections, is that I can make that all. We have all been making that all within our rooms by ourselves with other people through our own devices. You know what I mean? So yeah, you're just in control of a lot more than you think you are. And so take control of the things that you do have control over.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. You got to make work for yourself, and you got to make those connections when you can. And we've all had a crash course in consent and boundaries. So,
And if I could give advice to anyone else, I guess like take this as an opportunity to own in on your craft and get better at it, and also own in on like what you want to do. I spoke earlier about how it's difficult to like know who you are as an artist when there's no like audience reaction and engagement around you to like kind of inform that. But I guess the advantage of that is there's also no like audience interaction engagement to kind of taint what your true vision as an artist is. As a DJ, I was DJing a lot of, kind of parties and clubs that kind of expected top 40 throwback, your typical night out music, which I was happy to oblige to. It's not like I can't have fun doing that, but it is very much like there's a certain level of accessibility to a wide audience that you kind of slowly cater yourself to do when you're trying to make a living as an artist in the city. And it's nice that I don't have to do that anymore. I can really focus on the music that I truly like, the sound that I truly like, and what I believe my audience is, or whichever. So I think everyone should try and take the opportunity to do some soul searching as artists.
Follow your gut and honor your feelings and honor your boundaries. And if the creativity or inspiration isn't happening, know when it's time to like kickstart it, and know when it's time to just maybe not create in that moment, maybe not
cancel, postpone, change,
for sure.
I would also say keep going. Like, so yes, of course, like at the same time, honoring where you're at and, not forcing anything. But I do think it's an important time for us to just keep working however we can. Sometimes we couldn't or didn't want to or couldn't meet in the park. We'd work over Zoom. Maybe we couldn't do a whole rehearsal. We just have a quick chat. But if you can just keep going, I think it's a really important. We need artists right now, is what I'm trying to say. We need artists. We need art. We need innovative things. We need creativity. We need connection. So if you can find a way to keep going, it's important. Need you. Yes, exactly.
Stay safe. Follow all the protocols. Wear your mask. Socially distant. For sure. That's first and foremost. But more than that, I would encourage them to, just as I did, to diversify. Do not see themselves, just as creative artists in one particular discipline. I'm sure they find themselves dreaming of wanting to do something else. But pre-pandemic we were all very busy, just living our lives, so we weren't able to live out our dreams. I would say this is the time to try and do that, because it's not like it was before, where we busy going to rehearsals, going to the theater to perform, going to auditions. It's not as busy as it was before. So you have the time to look at what other things that you wanted to do and do it. Just go out and do it.
My advice would be that working also includes working on yourself. So my advice is to take time. I take my mornings to myself. And so take time, find time in your working day to also work on yourself. And work on yourself means like nourishing your body, meditating, going for a walk, talking to your family and friends, journaling, anything that is spending time with yourself, or like reflection, or just giving yourself space to breathe and to unwind, or just find moments of calm for yourself. It's important to rest, and it's important that that working isn't always, working for somebody else. That work on yourself is also work and should be given the same amount of time.
So, Monica, if you could give another artist one piece of advice for working during the Pandy, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to reach out. I feel that's something that I keep reminding myself, that I'm surrounded by people that love me, that people that care for me, that just because I can't spend time with them physically or see them as often as I used to, that doesn't mean that they don't love me. Something that I keep reminding myself to have time, not only to be alone, but to not give myself too much time to be alone, and to make myself available to other people, to be like, if you need to reach out, know that I'm here. And I think as artists, we keep forgetting that, because we're like, I can do it on my own. I don't need to bother people. I was like, don't think it as bother, just think about it as like collaboration and discussions and community building, and be, as others have said during this interview, is like, be gentle to yourself and listen to yourself. Being an artist, it's I think a lifestyle. You don't need to be creating new things all the time to call yourself an artist. And drink water. What about you, Camila?
It's hard to give advice when you're in the middle of it still, Like, I can try. I mean, I definitely think reaching out is just as important as reaching in, you know what I mean? And I think that because we've been so isolated, I think a lot of us have had to come to terms with ourselves in ways that we have never had to before. So I think that's kind of happening. And I just want to send love to everybody, because that's really hard sometimes. I just want to tell every artist listening to this, and every creative person, everybody with a creative soul who's listening to this, we need you. Right at the beginning of this pandemic, we were told that we are not essential and we should all just stay home and be quiet. And we didn't. A lot of us didn't, A lot of us started making work online or just work for ourselves in our own spaces. But I think that a year in, we're still kind of in the same place. And I think that we really do need you. We do. And we don't need the you from a year ago. We need the you now. We need the you that you've become. And what that I think requires is a lot of honesty. Like, I just want to encourage everyone to be as honest as they can be with themselves and with the people around them, because like, if you're finding something difficult, the only way that people are going to know is if you tell them. And everyone's in their own heads trying to survive right now. So I think communication is like a really, really important tool in the bag right now. Like, just clear, honest communication, because all of our systems are crumbling, as they should. Many of the systems that have been hurting us and everyone else are crumbling, and they should. Goodbye, But how we're going to build new ones, or how we're going to remember ones that are supportive, is us being really honest with ourselves and listening to the tiniest voice in our communities, listening to the tiniest voice in our bodies. And we don't have to do anything yet, Only act when you really feel ready. But listening is super important. Yeah. So I would say all of that. So to sum it up, basically, listen, be honest, and be nice to yourself because we need you. We are speaking to you from the shores of this beautiful Zagaigan, known to some as Lake Ontario, in Toronto, or Tuggeranto. This is the ancestral territory of the Haudenosaunee, or Longhouse Confederacy, the Anishinaabeg Nation, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum and Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase.
At Aluna, we remember that people can begin to heal when they are hurt. We are committed to artful participation in disagreements. We are committed to unsettling ourselves towards connection, respect, and justice for all people who now live in this city, which has been a meeting place since time immemorial.
Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Aluna Theatre, with support from the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and the Metcalf Foundation.
Aluna Theatre is Beatriz Pisano and Trevor Shelness, with Sue Ballant. Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Monica Garrido and Camila Diaz-Varela. For more about Aluna Theatre, visit us at alunatheatre.ca, follow at Aluna Theatre on Twitter or Instagram, or like us on Facebook.
Miigwech and Nyawangoa.